As one of the most underrated power forwards during the 2000s and 2010s, Zach Randolph is one player you would probably never think of when it comes to his position. After all, he played during an era where guys like Tim Duncan, Garnett and Dirk Nowitzki were the cream of the crop of the power forward spot. He's the poster boy of overweight, slow, and unathletic. And yet, he was a two-time All-Star and a key player for the grit and grind Memphis Grizzlies. Zach Randolph, known as Zebo, transformed from an underestimated and problem-making rookie into a Memphis Grizzlies legend. With his relentless hustle and heart, he redefined what it means to be a true underdog. But how did he change the game of basketball? Randolph started playing basketball early in his life and was a standout athlete in Marion, Indiana. He was already a dominant force down low in his sophomore year in high school, leading Marion High to the 1998 Indiana Class 4A championship game. Then, as a senior, he led his team to the state championship. He may have finished second in Indiana's Mr. Basketball voting, but he completely dominated the McDonald's All-American game in 2000, finishing with 23 points and 15 rebounds to win MVP honors. Simply put, young Zebo was simply too big and too strong for most players in high school. He may not have been the tallest, longest, or most athletic young man, but he pushed his weight around to full effect, punishing and bullying defenders down low and showcasing his adept skill as a scorer on the post. That's why he graduated from high school as the top-ranked player in the nation. Well, he could have joined any college program in the country because he was the top-ranked recruit. Randolph went to Michigan State to learn from Tom Izzo, one of the best coaches in the collegiate ranks. Michigan State won the 2000 national championships just before Randolph joined the team. He was coming into the program as their starting center, a position he hardly played in the NBA, but was quite familiar to in his younger years. As a freshman, he played around 20 minutes and averaged 10.8 points and 6.7 rebounds for the Spartans. But Michigan State failed to repeat as champions, losing in the NCAA semifinals. Randolph, however, decided that he would rather chase the NBA dream instead of trying to win a national title. After one season in college, he tried his hand at the 2001 NBA Draft, a class that included the infamous Kwame Brown. Several stars, however, emerged from that class, including Pau Gasol, Tony Parker, and Joe Johnson. Man, I love Joe Johnson. As good as Zebo was in high school, his performances in college didn't really stand out. It was clear that he was slower and less athletic when compared to a lot of big men in the draft. He barely jumped and could never outrun anyone. He was also quite overweight, somewhere north of 250 pounds. So, while he may have been a load down low due to his size and post-scoring abilities, he was never really someone teams thought could carry a franchise into the future. Zach Randolph was drafted 18th overall in 2001 by the Portland Trail Blazers. The Trail Blazers at that time were a team of incredible talent, but they were overshadowed by chaos. Each arrest and scandal revealed the harsh truth. Their toughest opponent wasn't on the scoreboard, but themselves. True enough, Zebo wasn't going to immediately make an impact in the NBA, where players were big and strong enough to handle him in the paint. As a result, he barely played during his rookie season and was only a backup big man in his second year in the league. He averaged 6.5 points across his first 2 seasons in the league. Zebo also earned a reputation for being a troublemaker and someone with temper issues. He was also one of them who got arrested for underage drinking and had the worst locker room fight in NBA history.
We go into the dressing room area of the locker room. Now they get the scrap and they lock up like WWF. They locking up. Zach had him. But Zach lifted up, and man, I swear to goodness, Rube did some like Olympic gold medal technical shit. All he did was shift his body a little bit, and that put Zach out of position. So you know in the locker rooms, it's that industrial carpet that's like a micro fracture of an inch thick. And then it's concrete under. Yo, boom. Rube slams Zach. And we was all like, oh, shit! And we called it the Slam Heard Around the World, and man, that was me and Bonzi fought right there. You know, Zach was out for about like 2 weeks, dog.
Ew.
As a result, fans didn't look at him with much favor, but he got his payback.
Rube and Quintel, they having a little beef over, you know, a little foul and shit. So, you know, coach like, all right, yeah, man, whatever. It was a foul. They like, you know, let's get back to playing. But, man, they took that shit personal. So, you know, it's like they was like face to face, like Rube and Quintel, like this face to face. And then, like, we all saw it. I didn't expect it. Out of nowhere, Zach came and pow, hit Rube in his face. He hit him in his eye. And as we found out later, that he fractured his orbital socket.
God.
Still, his performance during the 2003 playoffs, where he averaged 13.9 points and 8.7 rebounds in 7 games, changed the team's perception of him. They were now willing to go all in on Randolph as one of their main players. By the 2003-2004 season, he had become an offensive option for the Blazers. He averaged 20.5 points and 10.5 rebounds, winning the Most Improved Player of the Year award in 2004. Randolph was now learning how to throw his weight around in the NBA, focusing more on using his weight and heft to score against taller and more athletic defenders in the paint. He also used his size to get into the best rebounding position, becoming an instant double-double machine. Z-Bo continued his dominance as a low-post scorer while with the Blazers. He was averaging 20.2 points and 9.6 rebounds from 2004 to 2007. However, Portland never saw a single playoff appearance during that stretch, making it clear that Randolph wasn't going to be the player to make his team relevant again. He moved on to the New York Knicks in 2007 after getting traded there. But while he was still a double-double machine for the Knicks, he was never going to find his place with that team, prompting the franchise to trade him to the Los Angeles Clippers in 2008. Randolph had a forgettable time with the Clippers before the team traded him to the Memphis Grizzlies in 2009. The big man finally found his niche in the NBA after spending 8 seasons as more of a troublemaker and a headache for the teams he played for. The best part was that he fit the culture of the Grizzlies franchise, who were looking for physical and hard-nosed players willing to transform that team into one of the grittiest organizations in the league. At 28 years old, Zach Randolph made the All-Star team for the first time in his career after averaging 20.2 points and 12.2 rebounds for the Grizzlies. Under his leadership, Memphis nearly made the playoffs in 2010. This was the start of something special for Z-Bo and the Grizzlies. By the 2010-2011 season, the Grizzlies had transformed themselves into the grittiest and most physical team in the league. This grit and grind style turned into a culture for this franchise as the team acquired players who were willing to play a slow and physical brand of ball that focused on scoring inside the paint. Randolph formed a strong front-court duo with Marc Gasol, a huge 7-footer. While Z-Bo was more of an offensive option, Gasol made up for his front-court partner's defensive lapses by locking down the middle. This duo turned into one of the most physically imposing pairs in the league, and no one saw this squad performing as well as they did during the 2011 playoffs. Though he wasn't an all-star after averaging 20 points and 12 rebounds during the regular season, Randolph looked like the best power forward in the league during the playoffs. He was matched up with San Antonio Spurs' Tim Duncan, widely considered the greatest power forward the game has ever seen. But Z-Bo wasn't intimidated one bit. He thoroughly outplayed the older but more experienced Duncan, throwing his weight around the paint and finishing over any defense he saw. But when the Spurs took him out to the perimeter, Randolph was hitting mid-range jumpers like a true master of the post-up game. It didn't matter that the Grizzlies were going up against a 61-win team that had the first seed, because Z-Bo carried the team on his back and introduced the Spurs to the team's grit and grind style. At the end of that 6-game series, the Grizzlies emerged victorious, upsetting the first seed to become the first 8th-seeded team in league history to knock off the first seed after the introduction of the 7-game first-round format. Randolph averaged 21.5 points, 9.2 rebounds, and 3.3 assists in that series. Meanwhile, Duncan was limited to 12.7 points and 10.5 rebounds. This was when it became clear that Randolph was always an elite power forward. He only needed to mature and be in the right team and culture to become the best version of himself. Randolph continued to play an elite brand of basketball in the second round, averaging 22.9 points and 12.3 rebounds against the Oklahoma City Thunder, even as he played against elite big man defenders such as Serge Ibaka and Kendrick Perkins. But the Grizzlies couldn't grit their way out of that series, losing in a tough 7-game matchup that still proved that this team was on the rise. Meanwhile, Z-Bo was named to the All-NBA third team, marking his first and only All-NBA selection. The 2011-12 season was a down year for the Grizzlies because of their best player's injury. Randolph hobbled through the season and was ineffective throughout the first round against the Los Angeles Clippers. He averaged 13.7 points and 9.9 rebounds in that series, as the Grizzlies lost in 7 games. Most players tend to slow down and fizzle out after reaching their 30s and going through rough injuries, but not Randolph. He was no longer the 2010 double-double machine he used to be, but he was still an all-star in 2013, averaging 15.4 points and 11.2 rebounds. You might think that those aren't impressive numbers, but you also have to consider that the Grizzlies played the slowest pace in the league and only had a few scorers. On top of that, Randolph's numbers helped Memphis win 56 games in the regular season. He was just as effective throughout the playoffs. In what was undoubtedly his best playoff run, he averaged 20.8 points and 8 rebounds in a revenge series against the Clippers in the first round, before norming 18.4 points and 10.8 rebounds in a 5-game series win over the Thunder in the second round. The Grizzlies surprisingly reached the Western Conference Finals, where they were up against the Spurs. This time, however, San Antonio kept Z-Bo at bay, limiting him to 11 points throughout the entire series as the Spurs swept Memphis. Despite losing in the West Finals, Randolph still dominated down low, averaging 17.4 points and 10 rebounds the entire postseason, leading the Grizzlies in both categories. But the window for a title was ending for him and the Grizzlies as age was catching up to that team. He may not have been an all-star in 2014, but he averaged 17.4 points and 10.4 rebounds that season, leading Memphis to a 50-win season. He averaged 18 points in the first-round loss to the Thunder as the Grizzlies lost in 7 games. But the popular belief was that the Grizzlies could have won that series if Zach Randolph didn't get suspended one game for punching Thunder center Steven Adams in the jaw during Game 6. So, as mature as he already was at that point in the season, he was still a bit of a hothead who knew when to fight back when things got a bit too physical. Randolph may have already been past his all-star years, but he was still a double-double machine during the 2014-15 season, in what was arguably the team's final chance at a championship run during the grit and grind era. Randolph helped the Grizzlies to get to the second round of the 2015 playoffs, averaging 14 points against the Trailblazers, the team he started his NBA career with. But the Grizzlies ran into a wall in the second round when their grit and grind style didn't work against the fast-paced Golden State Warriors, a rising dynasty. Z-Bo averaged 17 points and 8.5 rebounds in that series and was unable to solve the Warriors' defense. This was the start of the fall for him and the Grizzlies. At the age of 34 and with aching knees and a body that continuously got heavier, Randolph already struggled to compete at the same level he once did. He was no longer as mobile as he used to be, although he was still a hard player to guard down low on the post. His minutes during the 2015-16 season dropped as he averaged 15.3 points and 7.8 rebounds. Injuries, age, and wear and tear have caught up to him, all while the Grizzlies barely made the playoffs and eventually got swept in the first round. By the 2016-17 season, Randolph accepted that he needed to come off the bench because he was now slower and older. The Grizzlies allowed the younger and more mobile JaMychal Green to start at power forward in place of the 35-year-old Z-Bo. This was also his final year with the Grizzlies, as he averaged 14.1 points and 8.2 rebounds off the bench. Memphis lost to the Spurs in the first round once more, struggling to beat this franchise ever since they upset them in 2011. Randolph's last playoff run ended with him averaging 13.2 points and 8.2 rebounds. Z-Bo, although thankful for the opportunity, ended his time with the Memphis Grizzlies by signing a 2-year contract with the Sacramento Kings during the 2017 offseason. He felt that he still had a lot to give to a team, especially one that needed a strong power forward to anchor the middle. True enough, he averaged 14.5 points and 6.7 rebounds for the Kings as a veteran big man who could still give any young player a run for his money. But the Kings couldn't get to the postseason as Randolph had played his final NBA game on March 19, 2018. When the Kings decided to focus more on their youth movement, Randolph fell out of the rotation and was eventually waived. In 2019, he announced his retirement from the game, although he could have still been a useful backup power forward for any team looking for instant inside points off the bench. Randolph, however, ended his career as a 2-time All-Star who averaged 16.6 points and 9.1 rebounds in 17 seasons played in the NBA. While he never won a championship in his entire career, he changed the culture of a franchise, turning the struggling Memphis Grizzlies into a playoff contending squad during his time there. In fact, he is 4th all-time in win shares for the Grizzlies, behind only Mike Conley and the Gasol brothers. More than that, Randolph became the symbol of success for undersized and overweight big men. Whenever you see a shorter but heavier post player, the first person you think of is Z-Bo, because he changed the game from that position and proved that big men don't need to be the tallest or most athletic players in the game. So the next time you see a shorter but heftier big man throwing his weight around the paint to score baskets, thank Zach Randolph for that revolution. Thanks for watching.